The Texas frontier was a land of opportunity, wild beauty, and unexpected dangers. In the spring of 1850, Banta sets out for a simple deer hunt, his rifle in hand, and the promise of a quiet morning in the mountains. What he found instead was unlike anything he'd ever faced before. A tale of close calls, quick legs, and creatures best left undisturbed.
Spring of 1850, Burnett County, Texas. It was a fine spring morning in Burnett County, and the air smelled of blooming wildflowers and fresh dew. As I prepared to head out on a hunting trip, Lucinda saw me off from the porch of our humble cabin. My parents were still visiting from Hunt County for our wedding, but were graciously staying with Lucinda's parents, Ezekiel Peter Hairston and Mary Jane Barnett Hairston, to give us a little privacy. Most of her siblings were already married and out of the house, save for Maya, who was 10 years younger than Lucinda and still full of youthful energy. Lucinda stepped onto the porch, a light breeze catching her braid and tugging at the hem of her apron. "Will, you best be careful out there today," she said, handing me a bundle of biscuits wrapped in cloth. "I don't want to have to explain to your parents why you've gone and gotten yourself into trouble." I laughed, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "Don't you worry, darlin'. I'll bring home more game than your folks can fit in their larder." She shook her head with a smile. "You just bring yourself home safe, you hear? Supper won't wait forever." As I slung my rifle over my shoulder and stepped off the porch, Maya peeked out from the cabin doorway, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you going hunting again, Will?" she asked, clutching the doorframe. I turned and tipped my hat. "That's right, little lady. Maybe next time I'll teach you a trick or two." Her face lit up, but Lucinda gave me a pointed look that said she wasn't keen on me encouraging wild ideas. "Shoo, Maya. Let Will get on his way," Lucinda said, ushering her sister back inside toward the kitchen. I waved to them both as I headed into the timber, feeling the weight of my rifle and the warmth of Lucinda's love carrying me forward. I turned back one last time to see her standing there, watching me leave, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. The thought of Lucinda waiting for me gave an extra spring to my step as I headed into the wilds. I had no idea how quickly my confidence would turn to chaos later that day, or just how grateful I'd be to come home to her. The morning passed uneventfully as I roamed the mountains. I had hobbled my horse, Buckshot, as I saw a herd of deer, and by midday I had bagged a fine buck. Feeling quite pleased with myself, thinking Lucinda worried for nothing, my smile grew. I made my way back to Buckshot and loaded him up with the deer, not wanting to overload him with this big buck. I took his reins and walked beside him as we headed home. Buckshot stopped first, alerting me. His ears twitched and his head turned left. Naturally, I followed his gaze to see what caught his attention. There was movement coming down the mountain, a group of strange-looking creatures I had never seen before, making their way toward me. At first, I thought they might be small bears, but their bluish-gray color didn't match any bears I had ever seen. After a moment, I realized these were javelina hogs, or those wild musk hogs everyone had been talking about. I'd heard about them, but had never seen them before. Among them were 3 tiny, striped piglets, no bigger than ground squirrels. They'd make fine pets, I thought, already imagining their small squeals and playful antics around the cabin. I decided then and there to capture 2 of the little ones. As luck would have it, the hogs kept coming closer. I pulled my rifle out of its pouch and told Buckshot to stay as I started up the hill. My horse, being well-trained, took several steps back and cocked his back leg as though he planned to watch the show. All in all, we put some distance between us. I raised my rifle, took aim at the largest one I figured to be the mother, and fired. Boom! Down it went. But to my surprise, and in a shocking moment, the others, instead of running off like any sensible animal would, bolted straight for me, squealing. They came at me with their teeth snapping like castanets. Clack, clack, clack. And I realized I'd made a grave error in judgment. I fumbled to reload, but my hands were shaking worse than a greenhorn at his first cattle drive. By the time I got my wits about me, the hogs were so close I could see the fire in their eyes and the foam on their mouths. I ran. I am not ashamed to say it. I ran like the devil himself was on my heels, my rifle all but forgotten. Down the mountain I went, my boots slipping on loose rocks and my heart pounding louder than a war drum. Every time I stumbled, I swore I could feel their tusks nipping at my pants. When I finally reached the base of the mountain, I stopped to catch my breath and gather what was left of my dignity. But the hogs were nowhere to be seen. They'd given up the chase. As I stood there, trying to calm my nerves, bent over in front of Buckshot, I made a solemn vow. I didn't want any of those kinds of pets, and I certainly didn't want pets that came with tusks and bad attitudes. As I led Buckshot down the trail, I couldn't help but mutter to myself, "Next time, we'll stick to deer." On my way back home, every snap of a twig or rustle in the bushes had me jumping out of my skin. By the time I reached the cabin, I was a sweaty, disheveled mess. Lucinda stepped out onto the porch as I approached. She took one look at me, pants torn, shirt covered in dirt, and my face pale as a ghost, and raised an eyebrow. "Well, what in heaven's name happened to you?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and amusement. "Lucinda," I said, panting, and fell onto the porch steps. "Let me give you a piece of advice. Never, ever try to make pets out of Mexican hogs." Lucinda grabbed a clean cloth and dabbed at the dirt on my face, shaking her head with mock exasperation. "Well, you're worse than a child. I can't leave you alone for a day without you bringing back a story like this." Maya wrinkled her nose as she joined us. "Well, are you sure you didn't lose your pants wrestling those hogs?" and giggled. I couldn't help but laugh. Though my legs were still shaky, Lucinda sighed and nudged Maya. "Go on and fetch him some water before he scares the chickens." Sipping the water and watching the warm glow of twilight, I smiled and said, "That I did, ladies, that I did." And as for the javelinas, well, I reckon I learned my lesson about messing with nature.
Life on the Texas frontier was full of lessons. Some learned the easy way, and others, well, they left a mark. Living in this untamed land tested a man's wit, his courage, and on rare days, even his common sense. I hope you enjoyed this story of frontier survival and folly. Thanks for watching another Banta story. If this tale brought a smile to your face or a shiver to your spine, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more glimpses into life on the frontier. And always remember, some adventures are better left to the imagination than the reality. But for those of us who lived them, well, we carry the scars and the stories to prove it.